You know that feeling when life is perfect? The kind of quiet, settled happiness that comes after years of hard work? That was my life with David. We had been married for 12 blissful years. David, a successful graphic designer, was steady, kind, and devoted. We had a beautiful old Victorian house, a project we bought together, poured our savings and sweat into, and finally paid off last year. Our home was our sanctuary, the ultimate symbol of our joint success and future. The only shadow in our life was David's relationship with his family. His father passed away tragically young when David was in college. His mother, an emotionally cold woman named Evelyn, never remarried and dedicated her life to running the small family investment firm left by David's father. David and his mother had a polite but distant relationship. David often joked, "My mother loves her stocks more than her son." We'd just settled in for a quiet Tuesday evening. It was pouring rain outside. I was on the sofa, scrolling through a book club selection, and David was in his office, finishing up a client project. The only sound was the gentle tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall and the rain beating against the window panes. Then came the knock. It wasn't a polite tap-tap. It was a hard, persistent thud, thud, thud that sounded less like a visitor and more like an urgent demand. David looked up from his computer, frowning. Who on earth would be here on a night like this? I got up and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. Standing on our front porch, illuminated by the harsh yellow glow of the security light, was a woman. She was soaked through, wearing clothes that looked too thin for the weather. But it wasn't her appearance that shocked me. She looked exactly like David. She had the same striking jawline, the same intense, deep-set hazel eyes, and even the same slightly downturned mouth. If you dressed her in David's clothes and gave her a short haircut, they could have been twins. She was maybe in her late 30s, about 10 years younger than David. "It's a woman," I whispered, stepping back. "She looks incredibly familiar, almost exactly like you, David, but I don't know her." David came to the door, peering out. The moment he saw her, his face went white. Not just surprised, terrified. All the color drained away, leaving him looking like a marble statue. "Open the door, Eleanor." "Quickly," he commanded, his voice tight. I hesitated, but the fear in his eyes was palpable. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The woman stepped inside, dripping rain onto our antique runner. She looked around our immaculate hallway with an expression that was a complex mix of resentment and ownership. "David," she said, her voice low and firm, ringing with a deep-seated anger, "it's about time." David couldn't speak. He just stood there, paralyzed. "Who are you?" I finally managed, stepping in front of David, feeling the need to protect my husband. The woman fixed her intense hazel eyes on me. "I'm not talking to the wife. I'm talking to my brother, or should I say my half-brother, David." "You're... what?" I stared from her to David, the silence stretched, deafening. David finally managed to choke out a single word, a name I had never, ever heard him utter. Jillian. Jillian, his secret sister. "Yes, it's Jillian. And it's been long enough, hasn't it, David? 25 years. You knew I existed. Your mother knew I existed. And you both decided I should remain the ghost in the attic while you lived in this palace built on my inheritance. What are you talking about, Jillian? I don't know you. You have no right to come here and accuse us of anything," I demanded, pushing the shock aside. Jillian laughed, a short, bitter sound. She reached into her damp coat pocket and pulled out a single, folded, official-looking document. She handed it to David. "Read it, David. It's an original copy of our father's final will, the one your dear mother, Evelyn, had misplaced immediately after his death." David's hands were shaking as he unfolded the heavy paper. As he read the first few lines, his face crumpled. He looked up at me, his eyes full of anguish. "Eleanor, my father, he had a secret family," he whispered, the words devastating in their simplicity. "Jillian is his daughter, from before he married my mother." "A secret family?" I felt the room spin. "David, you've never mentioned this. Your father was a good man." "He was a complex man," Jillian corrected, her voice ice cold. "He left me and my mother a small cottage, and he intended to leave us more. Much more. Because he knew he hadn't been an active father. That cottage was foreclosed on last week. My mother is sick, and I am homeless." She pointed to our house, to our beautiful, perfect Victorian. "But that's okay, because I'm not here for pity. I'm here for what's legally mine." Our father's will clearly stipulates that if his first wife, my mother, had passed, which she did 2 years ago, the remainder of his estate, including his share of the primary marital residence, was to be split equally between his 2 children, David and Jillian. "The primary marital residence?" I repeated, my mind racing. "The primary marital residence was your father's house, the one your mother sold 10 years ago." Jillian gave a cruel, knowing smile. "No. Your mother, Evelyn, sold the original house and used those proceeds and every penny of my inheritance to purchase this house. Our father's original assets bought this home. Legally, David, 50% of this house is technically our father's estate, and according to his true will, I own half of that 50%. Which means," she concluded, her voice rising to a triumphant, angry crescendo, "I own 25% of this house. And I want it, now." I stumbled back, leaning against the wall for support. 25% of our sanctuary. 25% of everything we had built, threatened by a secret sister David had never mentioned. A secret sister his mother knew about, and whose inheritance had apparently funded our current home. David was still staring at the will, unable to refute her claims. The perfect picture of my husband and my marriage had just been violently shattered by a knock on the door and a piece of paper that exposed years of profound family secrets and betrayal. Jillian's presence was a seismic event in our home. She stood there, soaked and defiant, holding the original will like a sword. David, my usually articulate, stable husband, was completely broken, staring at the document that proved his father's double life and his mother's profound deceit. I looked at David. "You need to explain this. All of it. Did you know your father had another daughter?" David slowly shook his head, the denial weak and hesitant. "No. I swear, Eleanor, I didn't. But I knew something was wrong after Dad died. My mother was erratic. She rushed the sale of the original house and the purchase of this one. She always referred to his old life but would never elaborate." Jillian snorted. "Oh, he knew. He just didn't want to admit it. Your mother, Evelyn, paid my mother, Sarah, a small amount of hush money every year, a pittance. She used my entire inheritance to buy this place so she could control the asset. David, you've been living in a house that was legally supposed to be partially mine since you moved in." The betrayal was twofold: David's father's infidelity and Evelyn's calculated financial fraud. We need to call your mother, I decided, grabbing my phone. This was beyond a domestic dispute. This was a massive inheritance crime. David, still visibly shaking, tried to stop me. No, Eleanor, wait. My mother. She has heart problems. This shock could literally kill her. She committed fraud, David. She stole from her husband's child and lied to her son. Her heart condition is irrelevant compared to the financial ruin she has just brought down on our heads. I called Evelyn. It took 3 tries, but she finally answered, her voice immediately sharp with irritation. David, is that you? What is it? I'm preparing for my bridge game tomorrow. It's Eleanor, Evelyn, and you have a visitor. Her name is Jillian, and she claims to be David's half-sister. She also has a copy of your late husband's final, real will. Silence on the line. A long, terrifying, heavy silence. Then a low, controlled whisper. Put David on the phone, Eleanor. Now. I handed the phone to David, watching as his mother's icy control broke through her shock. David listened, his face crumbling further with every word she spoke. He finally hung up, his hands trembling. She admitted it. She said Dad had an affair before they got married, and Sarah, Jillian's mother, was the result. Dad formalized his obligation in a new will right before his death. Evelyn said she saw the original will, realized the financial damage it would do, and hired a cheap lawyer to draw up a fake one, omitting Jillian entirely. And the house? I pressed. She confirmed that the original family home was sold, and she took the proceeds from that, which were technically split between the 3 of them, and bought this house, listing herself and David as the sole owners, not the estate. She said she did it to protect the legitimate bloodline. The sheer arrogance of Evelyn's actions was staggering. She didn't just hide a secret, she actively committed a crime, all to maintain her version of a family legacy. Jillian, who had been listening intently, finally interjected. See, I told you. Now you have 2 options, David. You can fight me, which means I'll file the original will with the probate court, and the legal fees will bankrupt you before I even win, or you accept the truth. What is the second option, Jillian? I asked, completely bypassing David's stunned silence. I need money. My mother is dying and the cottage was foreclosed on. My demand is simple. You immediately refinance this house, pull out my 25% equity and pay me out. That's the clean way. And I want the money within 1 month. 25% of our home's value. Even with the mortgage paid off, that was a staggering amount of money we didn't have in liquid cash. Refinancing meant taking out a massive new mortgage, essentially erasing years of financial freedom we had worked so hard for. And if we refuse? David finally spoke, his voice weak. Jillian smiled, not a kind smile, but a triumphant, venomous one. Then I go to the police about the fake will. I file a claim against the property for fraud and stolen inheritance. I'll force a sale of the house. You won't just lose 25%. You'll lose everything to the lawyers. And I'll make sure your dear mother, Evelyn, faces criminal charges for forgery and fraud. The ultimatum was terrifying. She wasn't just after money, she was after revenge. She wanted to dismantle the life David and Evelyn had built on her sacrifice. I realized I couldn't trust David to handle this. He was too emotionally compromised by his mother's betrayal and his father's secret. I had to take control. Give us 24 hours, Jillian, I stated, stepping between her and David. You will leave this house, and we will contact our lawyer. I will have an answer for you by this time tomorrow, but if you contact us again or try to involve the courts before my deadline, I will file a countersuit against you for harassment and extortion." Jillian assessed me. She saw the calm, icy fury in my eyes. She saw a woman who was financially focused and not afraid of a fight. She nodded slowly. 24 hours, Eleanor. I'll be at the Salvation Army shelter downtown. You know where to find me." She turned and walked out, disappearing into the torrential rain, leaving behind the chilling reality that our perfect life was an illusion, built on a foundation of lies and theft engineered by David's mother. The ghost had become a predator, and our house was the prize. The 24 hours Jillian gave us were a blur of frantic phone calls and crushing legal advice. The first person I called was our longtime family lawyer, Mr. Henderson. I presented him with the original will, Jillian's claim, and Evelyn's confession. Mr. Henderson's reaction was immediate and grave. "Eleanor, this is catastrophic. The original will is dated, signed, and legally sound. Evelyn's subsequent forgery, especially one involving real estate, constitutes serious felony fraud. Jillian's claim to 25% of the property is highly likely to be upheld in probate court, provided the original estate funds were indeed used to purchase your current home, which Evelyn seems to have admitted." "Can we fight the forced sale?" I asked, my voice strained. "You can try. But if Jillian goes to the district attorney with this evidence, Evelyn will be facing criminal charges. And if the property is tied up in a criminal investigation, it will be impossible to refinance. Your best, cleanest option is to pay Jillian off quietly, immediately, and force Evelyn to make the payment." The lawyer's warning solidified my decision. We had to sacrifice the equity to save Evelyn from prison, and more importantly, to save our home from a protracted legal war. David was still in shock, his loyalties torn between his mother, the criminal, and me, the pragmatist. "We can't just throw Mom under the bus, Eleanor. She's old. She did this to protect our family's name. She did this to protect her pride, David. And in the process, she stole from your sister and nearly ruined us." "She created this monster," I retorted, the fury finally breaking through my composure. "You call your mother. You tell her the lawyer's assessment, and you tell her that if she wants to avoid prison, she is selling every stock and every investment bond she owns to cover Jillian's 25% equity immediately." I knew Evelyn had significant assets from the family firm, separate from the house. She was financially untouchable, but I wanted her to feel the financial consequence of her betrayal. David made the call, retreating into his office for privacy. When he emerged an hour later, he was pale, defeated, but resolute. She wept. She admitted everything, Eleanor. She said she was terrified of the scandal. She also said she had always suspected Jillian existed, and her father's death confirmed her worst fears. She saw the will and just panicked. And the money. She has it. She has enough liquid assets to cover Jillian's share. But she has one request. She wants to meet with Jillian, one final time, to apologize and negotiate the final payment herself. She wants to look the woman she stole from in the eye. I sighed. It was a risky move, but also a chance for Evelyn to finally face the truth. Fine. But you and I will be there, and the meeting will be in Mr. Henderson's office. It will be recorded, and we will have a settlement agreement ready for signature. No dramatic, unsupervised family reunions. The meeting was set for the next day. David and I went to the lawyer's office an hour early. I had already drawn up the settlement papers. Jillian would receive a cashier's check for 25% of the house's current market value, signed by Evelyn. In return, Jillian would sign a full release, acknowledging the payment settles all claims against David, Evelyn, and the property, and she would hand over the original will for destruction. Evelyn arrived, impeccably dressed, but looked frail, her usual icy demeanor melted by fear. Jillian arrived, punctual and guarded, accompanied by a woman I assumed was her social worker or legal aid. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. Evelyn, surprisingly, was the first to speak. "Jillian," she began, her voice quivering slightly, "I know words are inadequate, but I want to tell you that I am profoundly sorry. I was a jealous, fearful wife who committed a crime to protect my version of my family. I stole your inheritance and your peace. I accept full responsibility." Jillian listened, her hazel eyes fixed on Evelyn. She didn't accept the apology, but she acknowledged it with a curt nod. "I didn't come here for your apology, Evelyn," Jillian stated. "I came for what my father intended for me. The settlement papers. Where is the check?" Evelyn's lawyer placed the cashier's check on the table. It was a substantial amount. My heart ached seeing that number, knowing it was the cost of Evelyn's pride, but relief flooded through me. The house was saved. Jillian picked up the check, verified the amount, and looked at Evelyn. "This is not forgiveness. This is payment for the theft of 25 years of my life. I hope you find some peace, Evelyn. I doubt I ever will." She signed the release papers, handed the original will to Mr. Henderson, and stood up. As she was about to leave, David, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. "Jillian, wait. My father, did he ever try to contact me? Did he ever tell you about me?" Jillian paused, turning back. She looked at David, and for the first time her face softened with a hint of shared sorrow. "Yes, David. He loved you. He was always watching. He left me one letter for you to be given to you if I ever met you. I never intended to give it to you if I couldn't get what was mine. But now that I have the money, you deserve the truth from him, too." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, yellowed envelope. She placed it on the table in front of David. "He died loving both of us, David. But your mother made sure we could never be a family." Jillian walked out. We were left in the sterile office, staring at the envelope containing the last words of David's father. The payment was made, the house was safe, but the final, most devastating truth was still locked inside that fragile paper. We left Mr. Henderson's office. The weight of the cashier's check lifted, only to be replaced by the profound, heavy anticipation of the yellowed envelope. Evelyn was silent, defeated, clutching her empty handbag. She had paid the price, but the shame would be her new companion. We drove home. David sat in the passenger seat, the letter resting untouched on his lap. He looked like a man suspended between two realities, the perfect memory of his father and the complicated, deceitful truth. As soon as we were back in the quiet sanctuary of our house, Evelyn retreated to the guest room, exhausted. I knew she was contemplating the wreckage of her pride. I sat with David in the living room, a space bought with stolen inheritance, now fully ours again, but tainted. "Open it, David," I urged gently. "You deserve to know what he wanted to tell you." David nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he broke the fragile seal. The letter was dated 2 weeks before his father, Robert, died. He read the letter aloud, his voice cracking with emotion. "My dearest David, if you are reading this, it means I failed. I failed to tell you the truth when I was alive, and I pray that Jillian was the one who delivered this to you. You are my light, my only son, but you are not my only child. I have a daughter, Jillian, born years before I met your mother, a beautiful soul I have failed for too long. I made amends in this final will. I ensured she and her mother were taken care of, and that my entire estate would be equally shared between you and Jillian. David, I need you to know that this was not a betrayal of you or Evelyn. It was an obligation of conscience. I hope you find her and welcome her into your life. She is a wonderful woman, and you share my heart. Please do what Evelyn could not. Be a brother to her. Love, Dad." David finished reading, dropping the letter onto his lap. Tears streamed down his face. He knew. He wanted us to be a family, and Mom destroyed it. She destroyed his final wish. The letter was a balm to David's soul. It exonerated his father from the crime of silence and shifted the entire moral weight of the betrayal onto Evelyn. David's sense of loss intensified, but his anger was now clearly focused on his mother. Later that evening, after David had taken a long, silent walk, he returned with a newfound resolution. He went to the guest room and confronted Evelyn. I stood outside the door, listening. I heard David's voice, low and firm, expressing his profound disappointment. Then I heard Evelyn's voice, small and broken, admitting her selfishness. But then Evelyn said something that made me freeze, something that contradicted the lawyer's assessment, Jillian's claim, and the entire premise of the last 24 hours. "David," Evelyn pleaded, "I know I was wrong to hide the will, but you need to know the entire truth. I didn't just hide the will. I didn't just create a forgery to save our fortune. The financial reason was secondary. I did it because your father, Robert, he didn't die of a heart attack, David. He died because of Jillian's mother. The air left my lungs. David's father's death was always attributed to a sudden, catastrophic heart attack, a tragic event that solidified Evelyn's image as the grieving widow. I heard David demand, 'What are you talking about, Mother? Dad died of natural causes.' Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. He was meeting with Jillian's mother, Sarah. He was leaving me. He was going to announce the divorce and the new will. I followed him. I saw them together. I confronted them. We had a huge argument in the street. Your father, he was yelling. He was so angry at me for spying on him." She paused, taking a ragged breath. "He ran back to his car. He was so stressed. I saw him grab his chest and collapse. It was a heart attack, David. But it was my confrontation, my fury, my jealousy that triggered it. I killed him, David. Not physically, but I triggered the event that killed him." The sound of David's chair scraping back was violent. "You were there? You didn't call the police? You didn't tell anyone?" "I didn't call anyone." I drove away. I went home and waited. I let them find his body hours later, and I let the narrative be tragic heart attack at work. I couldn't bear the shame. I couldn't bear to let them know he was leaving me for another woman. And when I saw the will, I knew I had to erase Jillian and her mother from our history forever. I had already lost my husband. I couldn't lose the control and the shame, too. I leaned against the doorframe, dizzy. The Secret Sister's inheritance was just the consequence of the real, hidden family drama. Evelyn's confrontation, which led to Robert's death and her subsequent cover-up of manslaughter and forgery. I backed away from the door, careful not to make a sound. I couldn't interrupt this final, shattering confession. The house was safe, but the cost was the absolute final destruction of David's memory of his parents. The revelation that his mother was not just a greedy fraudster, but an active participant in his father's sudden death. I realized then that this was the real price of the house. Our perfect life was built on 3 layers of deceit, infidelity, forgery, and a death covered up by Evelyn. I had married into a legacy of lies, and the secret sister was just the final desperate symptom of a disease that had been killing the family for 25 years. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. Evelyn was gone. David told me she had packed a small suitcase and left before dawn, checking herself into a private sanatorium, promising to never contact us again unless we initiated it. The final crushing confession that her jealousy caused her husband's death had broken her completely. She preferred isolation over facing the son whose memory of his father she had shattered. I didn't try to stop her. She had paid the financial price for her forgery, but the emotional price was far higher. David was a shell of the man I had married. His life was divided into 2 distinct parts: the 11 years he believed his father died a hero, and the 12 years since where he realized his life was a meticulously constructed lie, orchestrated by his own mother. He barely spoke. He avoided looking at the parts of the house Evelyn had personally decorated. We had saved the house, but we had lost the foundation of our marriage, the shared simple belief in the integrity of our families. "What do we do now, Eleanor?" David asked me one evening, his voice hollow. "The house is ours, but it feels like a museum of my mother's crimes." "We rebuild," I told him, holding his hand. "We sell the furniture. We change the paint. We stop letting Evelyn define our future. We start a new legacy." But I knew the burden of this new truth was too heavy for David to carry alone, and too heavy for me to bear in silence. I had married a man whose father had a secret life, whose mother had caused his death, forged a will, and nearly bankrupted us. I was emotionally exhausted. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I convinced David to start therapy, not just for the shock, but for the fundamental betrayal of his mother. "I need you to tell the therapist everything, David," I insisted, "about the will, the forgery, and what Mother confessed about Dad's death. You can't hold this in." He agreed. He started going to sessions twice a week. I thought the crisis was stabilizing. I thought we had successfully navigated the legal and financial minefield set by Evelyn. But the secrets weren't done with us yet. One morning, I was cleaning out David's old desk, looking for some property deeds, when I found a small locked metal box tucked beneath a stack of old blueprints. It was something I had never seen before. I showed it to David. "What is this?" "Does it belong to your mother?" He shook his head. "No." "I remember this. Dad used to keep his old watches and coins in here. I haven't seen it since he died. Mom must have hidden it." The lock was old and easily picked. Inside, it wasn't watches or coins. It was a file. A thin yellowed file marked simply, "Trust Fund, J.S." I pulled it out and opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. J.S. Jillian Sterling. It wasn't just a trust fund agreement. It was a complete legal trust, established 5 years before his death, specifically for the benefit of Jillian Sterling, daughter. It was fully funded with a substantial sum of dividend-paying stock from the family firm. The assets were held completely separate from the will and the rest of the estate. The trust stated that Jillian was to receive the full amount upon turning 35, regardless of the will's execution. Jillian was 38 now. I felt dizzy. David, look at this. Your father didn't just leave a share of the estate in the will. He set up a fully funded, separate trust for Jillian. This money should have been released to her 3 years ago. We both stared at the papers. The amount in the trust was enormous, significantly more than the 25% equity she had just claimed and received from us. Robert had ensured his daughter was financially secure, no matter what happened with the will. But the final line of the document was the most devastating. It stated that Evelyn, his wife, was the sole executor of the trust, responsible for initiating the transfer to Jillian on her 35th birthday. I called Mr. Henderson immediately. He reviewed the documents and his voice was heavy. Eleanor, this trust is legally ironclad. It was Evelyn's fiduciary duty to release this money to Jillian 3 years ago. She was legally bound to do so. But she didn't, I whispered. She let Jillian live in poverty. She let her cottage be foreclosed on. She let her think she was homeless and desperate. All so Jillian would come here and threaten us with the will, allowing Evelyn to pay her off with the smaller equity amount and keep the larger trust fund for herself. The entire drama, the shock, the knock, the will, the threats, the confrontation, the forced liquidation of Evelyn's assets was nothing more than Evelyn's final, desperate, elaborate scheme to cover up a 7-figure theft from a fully funded trust. She didn't pay Jillian off to avoid prison for forgery. She paid her off to avoid prison for grand larceny and gross breach of fiduciary duty over a multi-million-dollar trust fund. Evelyn was not a panicked widow who committed one crime. She was a master manipulator who executed a complex financial crime, using her son's safety as leverage, all while maintaining the lie that she was heartbroken over the will. She had willingly sacrificed her own dignity and her son's peace of mind to hold on to the stolen trust fund money. David looked at me, his eyes dead. She didn't just kill my father, Eleanor. She didn't just steal my father's last wish. She watched her stepdaughter suffer for 3 years, knowing she held the key to her financial security. She is truly evil. The ghost of the secret sister had been paid off, but the money we had given her was merely a distraction. The house was safe, but our legacy was irrevocably poisoned by Evelyn's unparalleled greed. I knew then that the rebuilding of my life with David had to begin with a final, painful act of justice, finding Jillian and exposing the final catastrophic lie that still remained hidden in Evelyn's possession. The story of the secret sister had reached its shocking conclusion, but the battle for the truth had just begun.